Welcome to a special edition of SpectrumCast. This edition is focused on technology partners that add capabilities to IBM's modern data protection portfolio. Hello, everyone, and welcome to a special edition of SpectrumCast. In this edition, we're going to highlight an IBM business partner that adds value to IBM's modern data protection portfolio. On this week's episode, we're talking to Predatar with CEO and founder Alistair McKenzie. Thanks for joining us this week, Alistair.
It's an absolute pleasure, Steve and Randy, and thank you for the introduction, and looking forward to getting into some of the meat of data protection, and in particular backup and recovery today.
Great.
And props to your graphic designer for your logo, which I really dig. Just want to put that out there.
And speaking of, always with me, my colleague, Randy Arsenault. Thanks for being with us today, Randy.
Gentlemen, thanks for joining us today. Thanks, Alistair, for coming on board. Appreciate it.
So, Alistair, why don't we get started with Predatar and who Predatar is, how that company came to be, and really, I got to know, tell me a little bit about the name. Sounds very ominous. I'd like to know what's behind that.
But in a good way.
Well, let's start with the name, shall we, guys? It's not that clever. Basically, it started off as predictive data, so pre-data. And then obviously we put an R on the end, and then it just a little bit of a wordplay. So, and then you get Predator, and then obviously you end up with the alpha male, the wolf head, and it just rolled from there. So
awesome.
I guess it doesn't have a lot to do with backup and recovery per se, but I think once you've got a name for a company and you like it and people get used to it and it sort of sticks as a brand, it's you got to roll with it, right? So
absolutely.
It's really interesting to find out how those things come about. I recognize that that accent a little bit. Why don't you tell us maybe where you're from and how you got interested in data protection and technology and that sort of thing?
So I'm from the UK. I'm a bit of a mongrel, a bit like the animal here maybe. So I was born in Wales, moved at an early age into England. My father was from the Highlands of Scotland. And my passion at school was mainly sport. I managed to scrape by, get enough qualifications to get to university, did an engineering degree. I was terrible at engineering, I've got to confess. Did mechanical engineering, enjoyed the university life, but really didn't come out with too high a score. And I did what most engineers do when they aren't very good at engineering. I got into the sales business. So I started off selling advertising space, commission only advertising space. And then I moved actually down to the southern part of the United Kingdom and into what's called the sort of tech corridor of the M3, M4 corridor coming out of London. Mm-hmm. And I've never really come across it before. And everyone was getting into tech, and someone told me, you want to don't waste your time selling advertising space. It was print as well, so definitely on the way down.
Wise choice at the time.
Yeah. And they said you might want to try tech. It's a little bit easier. And I mean, at the time in the 90s, the fish were jumping into the boat, and I thought, wow, this is an easy way of making money. So, and then it just happened to be a storage company, and I don't know what it is about storage, but it just seems to suck you in, doesn't it? And grabs you, and nothing ever stays the same, and it's constantly been reinventing itself, the storage business.
Yeah. I think it's because we're an industry that is perpetually serving an infinite demand that's always increasing. Mm-hmm. So there's always room for more data, more storage, more technology. So
it's like death, taxes, and storage, right?
There you go.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about Predatar.
Yeah. So as you know, we've been in the backup and recovery business now for 15 years. And when we started out, in the 2000s, we were one of those traditional IBM business partners that were really in the reselling business. So IBM provided great tech. We resold that tech. We did some implementation, project management type work. But increasingly, customers were asking us, could you provide post-sale support? Could you do managed services for us? And we started down that track, and we very quickly came up against a bit of a barrier to scale, and that was finding enough skilled engineers, enough backup engineers that could grow with the pace of growth of the business. And what we decided to do was look at, we did a time and motion study basically of where we were spending our time. And we found that we had really capable subject matter experts, backup recovery engineers, doing the same thing, repeatable tasks, day in, day out. And Predatar was really designed to, what could we automate? You know, what could we do to free up those engineers so that they could focus on getting deep into architectural decisions or forward-looking visionary architecture planning strategies to make the best out of their investment in their backup recovery technology. So the idea of the Predatar software platform was to try and give greater visibility and simplicity to managing. As you know, it's a daily task, right? It's like forever pushing that boulder up the hill. We just wanted to make that job just a little bit easier.
So Alistair, sounds like a great origin story, and it's a really good application of technology and automation and integration to solving those kind of, you know, repetitive problems and sort of force multipliers for your subject matter experts. Why did you choose IBM to partner with in this space? Why specifically IBM?
Yeah, so well, first of all, I think it all depends on, you know, where you're coming at it from, what your frame of reference is, and who your customers are. And our traditional history was to serve quite large enterprises. And what you find with large enterprises is they don't have a simple homogeneous environment, you know, and even today, as people start to move from old architectures onto, you know, second generation and third generation architectures, nothing ever gets completely expanded.
Nothing goes away. Yep.
So particularly in the large enterprises, they may have moved on to virtual platforms, and they may even be looking at container-based platforms. But guess what? There is still some of that, we call it gnarly infrastructure, you know, complex, heavy-duty databases, Unix-based systems. And what we found that we needed a partner, we needed a backup recovery company that was focused on delivering both the really complicated requirements that those sort of deep enterprise architectures required, but also had the R&D wherewithal and the budget to be able to transform that technology to cope with modern day applications such as the virtual environments. And in particular, what we've seen now is increased adoption of containers. And you know, I mean, IBM was never going to be our cheapest bet if we're going to build a platform, but you know, you get what you pay for, and we're dealing with large enterprises where data is worth a lot of money. Comparatively, you know, you're going to bet your business on a product. We personally felt IBM technology was something you could stand behind. It was something that made our customers feel secure, that when you called in that favor, when you called in that claim from your backup recovery vendor, 99.99 out of 100 times, IBM Tech was going to deliver for you and not let you down. And we felt, to secure our brand, we felt we needed tech that we could depend on, but also had that future focus.
I reading through some of your materials, I think one of the interesting things that it sounds like you build into your offering is you've got this really interesting 360-degree view of the data management environment for your clients, including alerting, obviously backup recovery, data protection. You know, you do kind of modeling studies. Talk to me about your whole portfolio of offerings. So if I'm a new client and I come to Predatar and say, hey, you know, I'm having a really difficult time managing my data protection environment in-house, what can you do for me?
Yeah, so I guess the vision that we have, the gap we spotted in the marketplace was that the technology to do large volumes, move large volumes of data around for backup and then again for recovery is not a trivial task, you know? So if you think about the backup vendors, in particular IBM, just their focus needs to be on doing that as efficiently and as productively as possible, you know, because you're having to do it across the whole enterprise landscape. You're moving data from clients across networks into different storage subsystems. That in itself is a incredibly complicated task. And I'm sure is why, you know, IBM spends so much money on R&D in keeping pace with that effort. What we found though was that ultimately, what customers, enterprises were wanting was a service. So yes, they weren't necessarily in love with the tech, and what they wanted was a good outcome. And so where we focused our technology was on the service management aspects. So what we care about is, with something like backup recovery, as you know, you've not just got one person that touches that technology. You've got, yes, of course, you've got your backup admins, you've got your storage admins, but then you've also got your DBAs, your application owners. Increasingly now you've got developers. They're starting to take control of their own destiny around backup. And in many cases, particularly in large enterprises, you've got third-party outsourcers and service providers. So you've got this whole mash of people that have a stake in data backup and recovery, and often there isn't just one person that owns it. So our vision is really to help those enterprises take control of data backup and recovery. And we do that by focusing not so much on the technology that IBM focuses on, moving all this data around, but we focus on how do all those different people collaborate together as a team to get the best outcome for their stakeholders, for the application owners. How do we manage the workflow so that when incidents and tickets get raised associated with backup recovery, they can be expedited and managed as efficiently as possible? How do we help them look at divulging information to specific stakeholders or application owners so that they get the information that's relevant to them and they don't just get bombarded with what could be meaningless technology data or KPI data? So it's all about building a platform that correlates and analyzes all of the data that's made available across a very disparate system. There's a lot of data that can come out of backup and recovery systems. And it's about analyzing that data and then presenting that data back in a very intuitive way to the various different stakeholders in a way that matters to them.
So also, I have a question. It might seem a little bizarre, but I want to ask it. And it kind of has two parts to it. And I like what you were talking about the different stakeholders within data protection. So part of the question is, have you seen that evolve and change over time? And when you get to speaking to a client who is understanding that the stakeholders that require protected data and might have a say in how to use the data protection solution, what's their biggest misconception when you're talking to people about that?
Yeah, well, you've seen, we've talked about it before, that as new infrastructure comes into an environment, it's often done on a project basis, and that project gets a certain capital budget previously, and so they buy the compute, they buy some storage, networking, and then they decide, we need a backup solution. And it's not always true that they go to the centralized standard backup system, backup recovery system, to protect that workload. So that's how big enterprises end up with these different silos of data. And one of them, of course, is, traditionally we used to see storage admins and backup admins heavily involved in backup recovery. But then you'd also see DBAs sort of doing their own thing. Maybe they had direct control over the RMAN logs for Oracle, for example, and the backup administrator was then subservient to this person. Increasingly, we've seen more involvement from the CISO. So although the backup and recovery team don't necessarily report into the CISO, they are now so powerful in most organizations that if the CISO wants to know, what are they doing around governance and protection against malware threats and things like that, then the backup guys tend to jump to the tune of the CISO. We're seeing that more and more, as well as obviously data governance officers, compliance officers. More recently, we're seeing developers wanting to have more control. And that hasn't played out yet. I don't know what you're seeing, but we don't know exactly, as the world of containers starts to grow and become the preeminent infrastructure architecture in most of these organizations going forward, we aren't sure yet exactly who's going to own the backup recovery and the storage management aspects of that. It's too early to say, I think.
Yeah. So First of all, I have to say, I as a former DBA, I stuttered a little bit when you said our man there, but I'm okay now. So you raise an interesting point. There's this constant shift in where the responsibility lies, for data stewardship and sovereignty and protection and reliability and reuse. So there's this ever moving target, which makes it difficult in your business in particular, I'm sure, to figure out who you're selling to, who's actually making the buying decisions. I think to your point about development, we're seeing DevOps and continuous integration and the emergence of containers driving a lot of those conversations as well. If you kind of think forward, think into the future, I don't know, maybe 12 to 18 months, although that's challenging, I know. Where do you see it going? Like, what do you think your business will look like given those trends that are emerging?
We're seeing the consumerization of enterprise technology.
Mm-hmm.
That's the massive trend we're seeing. Accelerated even more so in the last 6 months, as we've seen with cloud adoption and remote working, home working. Backup and recovery has we've noticed by looking at the analysis across our environments, our customers that use the Predatar platform to administer their backup recovery estate, we've noticed a little bit of entropy kicking in over the last 6 months. And the reason for that is the traditional IT administrators have been super preoccupied on cost optimization initiatives, security initiatives. Mm-hmm. And let's be honest, backup and recovery, although it's critical, it's been left a little bit in sort of third place. And as a result, you've seen this, lack of performance, this entropy of the state of their backup and recovery environments. Mm-hmm. And it's got to the point where obviously that most businesses need to focus on what they do best, and backup recovery isn't necessarily a core skill for them. And so what we're getting asked more and more is, we want to be able to deliver this technology, complex as it is, to our stakeholders, application owners, project managers, lines of business. So we want to be able to deliver that as a service. And IT teams have been tasked to match up with what the likes of the public cloud vendors are doing, mm-hmm. and to be able to mirror that in the ease of service delivery and the ease of, and so obviously that, as you know, that's difficult to do with traditional on-premise infrastructure. Mm-hmm. But even if it's not cloud, it's got to be cloud-like, and for that it means trying to deliver this as a more consumption-based service, yep. to these lines of business. Okay, and that's the big trend that we're seeing.
With this commoditization that you're seeing, Alistair, tell me a little bit about how Predatar then delivers return on investment to its clients.
Yeah, so bearing in mind the origin story that we talked about earlier, so where did Predatar come from? It was designed because the original reseller business that we started in the 2000s was doing support for multiple customers, and so what that was effectively doing was providing remote support services at scale. And so we were never the entitled owner of the infrastructure, we were delivering a service. I mean, that's what we did. So that lent us a very good starting point to be able to take complex enterprise backup recovery and then enable customers to deliver that in a consumptive manner, whether that be from a commercial perspective, whether it's, a metric per used per month billing mechanism, or whether it be automated configuration of the infrastructure, such as assigning new nodes to be backed up or decommissioning nodes to be backed up. And then of course, delivering the KPIs to the relevant stakeholders and lines of business. So what Predatar does is it effectively enables IBM SpectrumProtect technology, including SpectrumProtect Plus. It provides an out-of-band cloud-based SaaS layer that takes all the metadata out of the SpectrumProtect and SpectrumProtect instances, Plus instances, and then delivers all of that functional information around event management, service management, contract management, time recording, reporting, trend reporting. Delivers all of that in a very easy to use, intuitive interface. Okay.
And so interesting. So you are, and I know you cite some some data representing a study that was conducted that showed about a 62% reduction in savings as a result of it, which is awesome. So I think that makes a pretty compelling ROI, discussion just on the face of it. But it sounds like you're also enabling some new capabilities, right? Or unlocking some of the skill within the organization to be applied to higher value targets and higher value use cases, especially as clients, and you mentioned this, and certainly we're not only seeing it, but really driving it from the industry perspective, is this rapid acceleration toward hybrid multi-cloud, these environments that are increasingly complex, more on-premises workloads combined with multiple public cloud workflows, this kind of expanding digital supply chain, right? So you're right on the front edge of that, which is interesting. So are you seeing that trend emerging, and do you see that as an opportunity to grow your business as well?
Yeah, exactly. So one of the, like I said earlier, that 62% figure comes from the fact that, think of a barbell strategy. So on the one hand, you've got an enormous amount of repetitive tasks that an administrator of backup needs to do. And then on the other end of the barbell, you've got this more deep thinking, this decision support type role. What Predator aims to do is twofold: automate those repetitive tasks. And that's where the 62% time saving comes from. That then frees up the subject matter experts to then really delve into how they can focus on the things that can deliver real value. And as you know, for backup and recovery, how do you deliver value? It's down to the recovery. Ultimately, that's when the insurance claim comes in. Will this system get my data back? So what we've done is we've developed some technology that sits across, doesn't matter whether the customer is using SpectrumProtect or SpectrumProtect Plus, okay? We then group up all the different virtual servers into application groups, so that if you wanted to restore or recover those, it could be done in a single entity and get the whole service back. And then we basically automate that so that if they're critical service, for example, they can be recovered daily into a test sandbox environment. So then your application owners, your stakeholders that we were talking about earlier, then they know for sure, they're guaranteed that they can get that particular service back, and they know how quickly it will take them to get it back. And then there could be other systems that maybe you can leave on a rolling schedule basis of every month, just to make sure that they're not being left behind as well. And that is a far more agile method of doing restore testing than the annual DR test. You know?
And just a quick follow-up comment before I turn it back to Steve. One of the other aspects that's obviously driving your business and driving the industry as a whole is security, right? So the implications of cyber threats and threat detection, but you just raised an interesting point, which is that the threat detection and prevention is only part of the story, because eventually it's going to occur. There's going to be some kind of an event, a disruptive event. It's the recovery process. It's the intelligent, rapid, vettable recovery process. And that's really where players like Predator come into play.
Yes, and I saw on a previous vodcast, I think it was Trisha Yang, I think Steve finished up with a question and said, look, what one thing do you want your audience to take away? And Trisha said, don't forget, test your restores. And but when do people get around to doing it? They don't. They maybe do it once a year, and increasingly now with the pandemic, it's probably pushed down the priority stack. So you've got to make it simple for people. And really, if we're in a business that's trying to help enterprises take control of data backup and recovery, there's three ways we can do that. We can make it more visible. We can simplify it through automation of restore testing as one example. And the other thing is we need to be really future focused. So as we see the adoption more and more of containers, and IBM, is well placed to capitalize on that increasing adoption. That's why we partner with IBM, because the underlying platform, the underlying tech that IBM's developed can help us take us to a point where there should be no reason for customers to buy multiple different backup products and multiple silos. So we've got a single suite of technology which can back up everything end to end, the full spectrum, so to speak, from the complex infrastructures through to
Great. So Alistair, as a consumer of the IBM modern data protection technology, Protect Plus, I'm sitting here and I'm looking at my environment, and I've been working on backup. I've been doing it for decades. Different things behind me are changing. The applications are changing. The people who need to have access to that data are changing and evolving. What types of things should I be thinking in my mind that would lead me to say, hey, perhaps I probably want to turn this solution into a service provider and perhaps reach out to Predator?
Yeah, well, it all depends on who you are. I mean, I think if you're the backup administrator,
Yep.
Again, it depends on where you are in your career and what you want to do. So, we recognize that for many specialists in backup recovery, it's what they do. They're very good at it. And we wouldn't ever dream of saying to them, stop doing that, do something else, which is why we give them the platform first. We're very much a platform-led business. Take the Predator platform, make what you can out of it, use what you feel is necessary to make your job easier and give you control of your backup recovery environment. However, we do recognize that landscape is changing, and there are some customers where, maybe they want to make better use of the resources, and they've got other projects that they want to divert administrators to. In which case, then obviously the Predator platform can act as a link, if you like, between the enterprise and a service provider. And we actually are beginning a program we call it the Apex, no pun intended when it comes to the wolf, but the Apex Partner Program. And that is a network, a global network of highly specialized business partners that are deeply skilled in SpectrumProtect and SpectrumProtect technology. So that should an enterprise want to outtask some part of their backup and recovery processes, they know that there is a localized team, in the geography where they're based, that can deliver backup and recovery service to a very high standard, underpinned by this single platform of Predator, whereby they know they're going to get complete control over what's going on. They're going to have full visibility. So one of the problems with outtasking previously has been, you've thrown it over the fence to somebody else, and often the service is worse. Well, what Predator does is it allows complete transparency. So the end user, even if they outsource the problem, they still own the problem. And so what Predator allows them is complete visibility into what's going on into that environment, whichever the Apex partners that they want to use to ultimately deliver the services.
If I look at the different use cases that Predator provides, and again, I'm that data protection administrator, and I'm thinking about, hey, perhaps I should outsource some of this. Maybe that makes more sense. I want to be a little bit more strategic in some of the things I'm doing. Where do I start?
What you mean in terms of what roles, what tasks you might want to?
That and like I noticed, like you have Spectrum Protect or Protect Plus health checks. You have obviously the backup and recovery services. You have the licensing audit. As I start to step into this world and I begin working with Predator, what are some of the things I would start out by doing?
Yeah, well, I think the first thing is to get a sense check and visibility into what you've got now. So there's nothing like just shining a light, if you like, on your environment, and just to peel it back a little bit and lift up the drain, so to speak, and understand the health of your environment. But you don't want, I mean, the problem with traditional methods, it's been, we need to give you a health check, which means a very intrusive, almost boots on the ground style model, which is slow and cumbersome. So what we offer is basically, we've taken the Predator software platform, and if you go to predator.com/take-control, you will see our pricing plans. And in there is the starter product, which is Predator Insights. And that is a free, forever free SaaS product, which you can download. Takes a few minutes to download. And from that, you can roll it out across your whole environment. There's no restrictions in terms of the number of users or the number of SpectrumProtect nodes or servers. Just help yourself. And because we feel that reporting is a basic human right. Reporting and analysis, you should just have it, right? Mm-hmm. So we give that away as a free option. And that will just help you get to get some decision support information. And where you go from there, if you want to go further into some of the automation technology and some of the orchestration and workflow management, then you can trade up to that at some point in the future, but there's no obligation to do that. So that's what I would recommend is, use the free software that you've got access to, and just get a better handle on your current estate.
Yeah. love the freemium model. And that's a great way to, not only add value. So you can provide an additive value and an accretive value story to clients and potential clients. But I really like the sort of community approach to solving these kind of complicated problems. So big props for that. Could you share, possibly, without naming names presumably, but if you have any kind of recent customer experiences that you might share that kind of highlight the value proposition and the benefits of the solution?
Yeah, so we're focused primarily in three markets: the DACH region, which is Germany, Austria, and Switzerland; North America, obviously USA and Canada; and the UK. And so that's our focus area for the next sort of six to 12 months. The sort of customers typically, they tend to be everything from the mid-market customers right the way through to large customers. So one of our customers is IBM Global Services. They, as a service provider, use the Predatar platform to deliver an outsourced service for one of the large retail banks in the UK, called a retail bank called Lloyds Banking Group. I think it's the largest retail bank in the United Kingdom. And obviously, as you can imagine, it's got a very large estate, tens of thousands of virtual nodes that are backed up by Spectrum Protect. And the IBM Global Services team use Predatar because they've got, 6 or 7 backup administrators that find it easier to collaborate around a platform such as Predatar to deliver really high quality backup and recovery service.
Great. So, Alistair, you mentioned if I want to use your technology, I can go to your website. And by the way, Randy and I both did check out your website and really love the design, the flow, and that sort of thing. I want to get started with your technology. You want to give me that website again? It's predatar.com/
take-control.
Take-control. And I can download the initial components and get started with kind of reporting, as you said. Now,
yeah, it's a simple one-page landing page, and then at the bottom you've got the pricing plan. There's 4 different options, and then if you just want to go through to, we call it Predatar Insights, the freemium offering, the free offering. Mm-hmm. Just click from there. It'll take you through to a registration page. Download the software, and you're away.
And now I want to go to the next level with you guys. I want to go deeper. Do I buy it from you? Do I buy it off the web? Tell me a little bit about the buying process as a consumer.
Well, we're big into creating this global network of highly specialist partners. I mentioned it earlier, the Apex Partner Network. So we're a platform business, first and foremost, not a service-based business. But we do have a number of partners in North America. I'll name a couple for you. Converge One, it's a big national provider, and Connectria is a big cloud services provider. And then in Germany, we've got Empalis Consulting as a strong player, covering the German, Austrian, Switzerland territories. So if you want to take the free product and use either Entry, Plus, or Premium, I'd recommend you reach out to one of those partners, and maybe they can help you with customizing and tailoring that to your specific environment. And if they've got extra services that you could benefit from, they would be able to do that in your local language, so to speak, or your local territory.
Very good. Alistair, I want to thank you very, very much for coming on the podcast. It's been wonderful having you. I am looking forward to hearing about more and more about what Predatar does with the IBM Modern Data Protection technologies and solutions. And Randy, yes, you put up their website. Very cool looking, as we had said before. I think plug. You had mentioned to me you had just done a redesign there on it. So
yeah, we just a story on we've kept the wolf head logo, but we've also brought in this concept of building blocks, because we see if you're building services, particularly around containers, it's about building blocks of services. And so we've got this concept of the orange and the blues. So the blues, obviously, a lot of our technology is built on top of IBM technology. We've even nodded, if you remember the famous IBM logo with the I, the B, and the M.
Yeah, the rubric.
Yeah, that's it. We've even slight doff of our hat, if you like, Randy, to IBM's great branding in the past.
Love it.
Great. Yeah.
Very cool.
So thanks again, Alistair, and we look forward to talking to you in the future, and really appreciate you coming on today.
Yes, great stuff, Alistair. Thank you so much. Really insightful.
Steve, Randy, no, I appreciate you giving us the opportunity to share our story and find out what's going on at IBM. So, thank you for your time today and hope you enjoyed it.